In a recent video, I mentioned Paco, the hypothetical guy who goes by inmates' homes whenever they're incarcerated in order to sleep with their wives. I was contacted by a surprising number of Marines advising me that I got the name wrong. Apparently, the guy's name is Jody. First, thanks for clearing that up, but more importantly, to any service personnel watching, thank you for your service. I know that I've said that before, but it's my sincere belief that anyone who stood between me and danger, between my loved ones and danger, they should be thanked explicitly. I'm not surprised that there are a large number of service personnel who watch shows about prison, and the reason why is a sad one. I've mentioned before that 8% of inmates in CDC, they are military veterans. This is a really high number, and I talked about it in my Memorial Day video, so I'm not going to belabor the point, except to note that given the number of service personnel in prison, it's not surprising that a large number of veterans watch shows about prison, and it's not surprising that I knew a number of veterans while incarcerated. One veteran with whom I was well acquainted, we were friends, was Ghost. He and I were both clerks at SADF. I was a lieutenant's clerk and he was a sergeant's clerk, as I recall. He trained me for the position. He was interesting in that he had a criminal case that really stood out. You see, he was a career service person. He did a full 20 years as a Marine. And then he became involved in organized crime after he got out of the military. One day, whenever he came home, and bear in mind, this is his story, this isn't authenticated, I didn't look at paperwork, it's just his version of events. One day, whenever he came home, he noticed that his wife was acting strangely. As he stood in the bedroom, he heard the sound of the safety on the pistol being disengaged. He drew his own pistol, spun, and fired at the rival gang member who was stepping out of his closet. His story is that he had recognized the sound, turned and fired on reflex, and without knowledge that this guy was sleeping with his wife. The district attorney's story, at least as I understood it, was that he had murdered the gentleman in cold blood, and his wife corroborated that version of events. This was interesting because, at least according to him, he had an expert witness who was an expert in the training of military personnel and specifically Marines. And this expert witness had testified that it was very unlikely that this shot had been a premeditated shot because Ghost had not fired from a solid position. His firearm had been very low and at a strange angle, suggesting that it had been fired on the draw, that he had fired it as a reflex when he heard the sound. Uh, this information wasn't enough to make it so that Ghost didn't go to prison. And again, this is just his version of events. It's what he told me while we were drinking coffee and typing up reports. I certainly don't know what actually happened. Of course, it's not only people who served in the military and then came to prison who both serve in the military and come to prison. There's another way that this thing can happen. It's possible for somebody to come to prison for even a serious crime and then be paroled and go to a U.S. military recruiter, and they will allow them to serve in the military if the crime wasn't too bad. If you're a murderer or a rapist or any truly abhorrent crime, it's really unlikely that they'll allow you to serve in the military. But if perhaps you had a DUI where something terrible happened, or if you got into a fight and hurt somebody far more than you meant to, it's quite reasonable that whenever you parole, you could still join the military. I had one cellie who was very excited at this concept. He had decided that whenever he got out, because he was only serving 3 years, his name was Caveman, that he was going to join the military and participate in the Afghanistan conflict. He was a patriot. He really liked the idea of protecting his nation, was the way that he described it. I remember expressing to him that if he was really interested in serving in the military, that he should take this time that he had, this 3 years, and learn a language, because what the military needed far more than guys who could do 100 burpees and fire a pistol was people who spoke Farsi and Pashto, because the human resources, the intelligence, the boots on the ground, that was really what was needed in this conflict, or at least that's what I'd read in the magazines that I was reading. He didn't learn Farsi, as it were, but he appreciated my input, my advice into his dream, and I sincerely hope that things worked out really well for him. I didn't maintain contact with him. I usually wrap up these videos with a little moral or a lesson. Stop and look around your everyday life. Don't take things for granted. This video, it's a pretty obvious one, what I would say. Thank military personnel. Thank them for their service. Thank them for having kept you safe. You don't need to agree with everything, but you can at least honor the soldiers who suffered, in some cases died, with the real belief that they were protecting their country, and you and I. But rather, this time what I'm going to say is that if you truly want to honor a service personnel, be brave in your life. If you have the opportunity to protect somebody weaker than you, to stand up to something that you know is wrong, do it. If you can, safely. That's the way that I would want to be thanked, were I a service personnel. Thank you for listening today.